During the dock labourers' strike in 1887, relief money had to be spent for fighting before the courts for the right of picketing, while the prosecutions of the last few years menaced once more to render the conquered rights illusory. As to the other European states, sufficient to say that up to a very recent date all sorts of unions were prosecuted as conspiracies, and that nevertheless they exist everywhere, even though they must often take the form of secret societies, while the extension and the force of labour organizations, and especially of the Knights of Labour, in the United States and in Belgium, have been sufficiently illustrated by strikes in the 90s. It must, however, be borne in mind that, prosecution apart, the mere fact of belonging to a labour union implies considerable sacrifices in money, in time, and in unpaid work, and continually implies the risk of losing employment for the mere fact of being a unionist. A weekly contribution of 6d out of an 18s wage, or of 1s out of 25s, means much more than 91 out of a 3001 income. It is mostly taken upon food, and the levy is soon doubled when a strike is declared in a brother union. The graphic description of trade union life by a skilled craftsman, published by Mr. and Mrs. Webb pages 341 sequence, gives an excellent idea of the amount of work required from a unionist. There is, moreover, the strike, which a unionist has continually to face, and the grim reality of a strike is that the limited credit of a worker's family at the baker's and the pawnbroker's is soon exhausted. The strike pay goes not far, even for food, and hunger is soon written on the children's faces. For one who lives in close contact with workers, a protracted strike is the most heart-rending sight, while what a strike meant 40 years ago in this country, and still means in all but the wealthiest parts of the continent, can easily be conceived. Continually, even now, strikes will end with the total ruin and the forced emigration of whole populations, while the shooting down of strikers on the slightest provocation, or even without any provocation. See the debates upon the strikes of Falkenau in Austria before the Austrian Reichstag on the 10th of May 1894, in which debates the fact is fully recognized by the ministry and the owner of the colliery. Also the English press of that time is quite habitual still on the continent, and yet every year there are thousands of strikes and lockouts in Europe and America, the most severe and protracted contests being as a rule the so-called sympathy strikes, which are entered upon to support locked out comrades or to maintain the rights of the unions. And while a portion of the press is prone to explain strikes by intimidation, those who have lived among strikers speak with admiration of the mutual aid and support which are constantly practiced by them. Everyone has heard of the colossal amount of work which was done by volunteer workers for organizing relief during the London dock labourers' strike of the miners who, after having themselves been idle for many weeks, paid a levy of 4 shillings a week to the strike fund when they resumed work, or of the miner widow who, during the Yorkshire Labour War of 1894, brought her husband's life savings to the strike fund, of the last loaf of bread being always shared with neighbours, of the Radstock miners favoured with larger kitchen gardens, who invited 400 Bristol miners to take their share of cabbage and potatoes, and so on. All newspaper correspondents during the great strike of miners in Yorkshire in 1894 knew heaps of such facts, although not all of them could report such irrelevant matters to their respective papers. Many such facts will be found in the Daily Chronicle and partly the Daily News for October and November 1894. Unionism is not, however, the only form in which the workers' need of mutual support find its expression. There are, besides the political associations, whose activity many workers consider as more conducive to general welfare than the trade unions, limited as they are now in their purposes. Of course, the mere fact of belonging to a political body cannot be taken as a manifestation of a mutual aid tendency. We all know that politics are the field in which the purely egotistic elements of society enter into the most entangled combinations with altruistic aspirations. But every experienced politician knows that all great political movements were fought upon large and often distant issues, and that those of them were the strongest which provoke most disinterested enthusiasm. All great historical movements have had this character, and for our own generation, socialism stands in that case. Paid agitators is no doubt the favorite refrain of those who know nothing about it. The truth, however, is that, to speak only of what I know personally, if I had kept a diary for the last 24 years and inscribed in it all the devotion and self-sacrifice which I came across in the socialist movement, the reader of such a diary would have had the word heroism constantly on his lips. But the men I would have spoken of were not heroes, they were average men, inspired by a grand idea. Every socialist newspaper, and there are hundreds of them in Europe alone, has the same history of years of sacrifice without any hope of reward, and in the overwhelming majority of cases, even without any personal ambition. I have seen families living without knowing what would be their food tomorrow, the husband boycotted all round in his little town for his part in the paper, and the wife supporting the family by sewing, and such a situation lasting for years, until the family would retire without a word of reproach, simply saying, "Continue, we can hold on no more." I have seen men dying from consumption and knowing it, and yet knocking about in snow and fog to prepare meetings, speaking at meetings within a few weeks from death, and only then retiring to the hospital with the words, "Now, friends, I am done. The doctors say I have but a few weeks to live. Tell the comrades that I shall be happy if they come to see me." I have seen facts which would be described as idealization if I told them in this place, and the very names of these men, hardly known outside a narrow circle of friends, will soon be forgotten when the friends too have passed away. In fact, I don't know myself which most to admire, the unbounded devotion of these few, or the sum total of petty acts of devotion of a great number. Every quire of a penny paper sold, every meeting, every 100 votes which are won at a socialist election, represent an amount of energy and sacrifices of which no outsider has the faintest idea. And what is now done by socialists has been done in every popular and advanced party, political and religious, in the past. All past progress has been promoted by like men and by a like devotion. Cooperation, especially in Britain, is often described as joint stock individualism, and such as it is now, it undoubtedly tends to breed a cooperative egotism, not only towards the community at large, but also among the cooperators themselves. It is nevertheless certain that at its origin the movement had an essentially mutual aid character. Even now its most ardent promoters are persuaded that cooperation leads mankind to a higher harmonic stage of economical relations, and it is not possible to stay in some of the strongholds of cooperation in the north without realizing that the great number of the rank and file hold the same opinion. Most of them would lose interest in the movement if that faith were gone, and it must be owned that within the last few years broader ideas of general welfare and of the producer solidarity have begun to be current among the cooperators. There is undoubtedly now a tendency towards establishing better relations between the owners of the cooperative workshops and the workers. The importance of cooperation in this country, in Holland and in Denmark, is well known, while in Germany and especially on the Rhine, the cooperative societies are already an important factor of industrial life. Footnote: the 31,473 productive and consumers associations on the Middle Rhine showed, about 1890, a yearly expenditure of 18,437,500. 3,675,000 were granted during the year in loans. It is, however, Russia which offers perhaps the best field for the study of cooperation under an infinite variety of aspects. In Russia it is a natural growth, an inheritance from the Middle Ages, and while a formally established cooperative society would have to cope with many legal difficulties and official suspicion, the informal cooperation, the artel, makes the very substance of Russian peasant life. The history of the making of Russia and of the colonization of Siberia is a history of hunting and trading, artels or guilds, followed by village communities, and at the present time we find the artel everywhere, among each group of 10 to 50 peasants who come from the same village to work at a factory, in all the building trades, among fishermen and hunters, among convicts on their way to and in Siberia, among railway porters, exchange messengers, custom house labourers, everywhere in the village industries, which give occupation to 7 million men, from top to bottom of the working world, permanent and temporary, for production and consumption under all possible aspects. Until now many of the fishing grounds on the tributaries of the Caspian Sea are held by immense artels, the Ural River belonging to the whole of the Ural Cossacks, who allot and re-allot the fishing grounds, perhaps the richest in the world, among the villagers, without any interference of the authorities. Fishing is always made by artels in the Ural, the Volga and all the lakes of northern Russia. Besides these permanent organizations, there are the simply countless temporary artels constituted for each special purpose. When 10 or 20 peasants come from some locality to a big big town to work as weavers, carpenters, masons, boat builders, and so on. They always constitute an hotel. They hire rooms, hire a cook (open bracket). Very often the wife of one of them acts in this capacity (close bracket), elect an elder, and take their meals in common, each one paying his share for food and lodging to the hotel. A party of convicts on its way to Siberia always does the same, and its elected elder is the officially recognized intermediary between the convicts and the military chief of the party. In the hard labour prisons they have the same organization.